hello, and welcome to the Riverfront Reds Show, where we will spend the next hour pondering the possibilities of how is it possible, Stephen Offenbaker, that Paul Skeens could have a losing record. It doesn't make sense. Stephen Offenbaker from Locked On Reds is kind enough to join me this week to talk about all things Cincinnati Reds, including his whirlwind trip to the mainland to suffer at Major League Baseball's version of the Fry Fest. How did that go? Bristol wasn't so kind to you, was it?
No, and that whole trip was snake bit, to be honest. I was trying to get out of Hawaii the night we had the tsunami, so all of the flights got canceled. Mm-hmm. And then the next day was a train wreck at the airports, and it was a delay after a delay. But I finally got to Cincinnati, and the Cincinnati portion of my trip was great. A couple games there at GABP, watching the Reds and the Braves. I always have a great time in town. But then made the drive down to Bristol. The drive was great. The Blue Ridge Mountains are beautiful. Bristol itself, the Motor Speedway, the history of all that, great. Major League Baseball had no clue what it was doing. Had they just adopted what NASCAR does and followed NASCAR's rules, 91,000 people, there would have been plenty of everything, and the only real problem would have been getting out at the end. Mm-hmm. You can't blame baseball for the weather. But what ended up happening is MLB got greedy. They made it where you couldn't bring outside food and drink in like NASCAR does. The concession stands couldn't keep up. The concession stands were open, but only half open. They didn't have the volume of food needed for 91,000 people. They didn't have the volume of merchandise for 91,000 people. Then the rains came. There was no place for you to get. The fan zone was probably two-thirds too small. It needed to be two-thirds bigger in order to accommodate everything that was going on. And, I think the people suffered and paid the price for it. And the real sad piece of all this, Seth, at the end of the day, this was a successful event for Major League Baseball. Yeah. This was a successful event for Rob Manfred's checkbook. Everybody spent their money. Everybody bought their tickets. All 91,000 of us bought those tickets. And the food that they did have sold out. The merch that they did have sold out. So baseball made its money, and I'm sure they'll explore doing things like this again. I will never set foot in another baseball-sponsored event in a non-baseball area. They screwed this up so bad. Single worst sporting event I have ever been to.
Now, I want to go through this a little bit, and if you folks haven't heard the entire story, Stephen did a great job on his Locked On show of detailing his experiences at Bristol, so I'm not going to make him do that completely again. But the thing that was interesting to me was I was here back in Columbus, Ohio. My son was trying out for the soccer team at his high school as a freshman. I wanted to be here for that, and I just decided about a month or two ago, I'm like, I'm not even going to bother. I'm not even going to try. But I started seeing on Twitter, I was like, oh, boy, yourself and Tim Daniel, I think was with you, and some other folks I know that were down there. I was texting with Chad Dotson a little bit and things like that. And I just started recognizing, even before I knew it was going to rain, that, oh my goodness, they're not having a good time with the Fan Fest and the things you were doing there. I guess, at what point did you kind of realize, ooh, this isn't going well?
15 minutes after getting through the gate. I was forgiving of the line to get into the complex. Again, that's a lot of people coming into one place. And I've been to big events, you guys. I go watch Ohio State football at the Shoe, 100,000 plus people each and every time. You figure out how to handle it. I went to the Rose Bowl last year, Ohio State, Oregon. It was functional. You could get where you wanted to go. There was not a problem. I got to Bristol and waited in line to get in the stadium, and that was not unexpected. But then when you have to wiggle and squeeze your shoulders and do all of those things just to even get into the fan zone event, and then once in there, you literally can't move around. I already knew we were in for big problems, and it was really just all downhill from there.
Yeah, you described fights, things breaking out. It just wasn't good. And then, of course, and it was actually, they weren't even talking about it on the TV. I watched a little MLB Network coverage and then the Fox pregame. They didn't really talk about the fact that it had already rained. And then it kind of was starting again as they were doing Tim McGraw's show and things like that. And you made comments on Twitter and on your show. It's hard at that kind of event to project a concert, right? I mean, like it's not, they didn't build that stage just for the concert. It reminds me a little bit, Walk the Moon played after a Reds game years ago, and we had my son who was only like 4 or 5 years old. Maybe he's like 6 or 7. But we were in the lower level of Great American Ballpark, and the sound bounced off of the concrete in such a way to where we were sitting down the first base line that it just created like an echo chamber. And my son was just like not happy, and like he's hey, can we go? This isn't good. And I'm like, I can't even hear what they're. I mean, I suppose if you're right in front of it, you'd be fine. But yeah, it just seemed like overall it was a made for TV event, and you find folks that were there weren't really considered important except for the fact that you spent the money to be there.
Right. And they got their number, right? They got their all-time largest crowd to buy tickets to a baseball game. I don't think near half of those people actually attended the game, but with the rain delay. But baseball met their numbers. They got to say they broke a record. They get to call this a successful event, and it leads for more money-making opportunities for them down the road, I guess.
And we had to listen to Big Papi, A-Rod, and Jeter talk about the Red Sox and Yankees for an extra 3 hours, basically. It brought to mind a little bit. I wanted to share a few things. We've got some viewer mail questions later that a few folks brought up events that they've attended that didn't go so well. I have a few. One of them reminded me of what you were saying. Usually you're right. At Ohio Stadium, 105,000+ people, they do a pretty good job overall. Now, when they switched over to the electronic ticket scanners, I remember that being a problem for a game or two or three. But the one I was thinking of that compared, not even close to comparing to what you went through, but as far as what you deal with, I went to the Ohio State Oregon game in 2021. Now they lose the game, so that hurts also. So that's part of it. But that was not even coming out of COVID. It was still technically COVID era of rules and things like that. I remember they didn't have vendors in the stands at all. And they were trying to set up some of those like self-pay stations and things like that, but they weren't employing enough people. And I mean, the lines to get even just a Coke or something like that, I remember people missing entire quarters. Entire quarter, you spend, $100 or more to get in the game, and then you miss an entire quarter to get a drink when it's 85, 90 degrees outside. Something like that. I remember that day being pretty much a downer. Obviously, the Michigan game this past year was so cold, and then the result of the game was what created the downer. And that's where, Steven, you go to those games, and sometimes people stay for Carmen, Ohio. Sometimes people leave early because Ohio State blows a lot of teams out. So normally exiting from like C deck is not a problem. But this game came down to the wire. They lose the game to that team up north, and we are stuck. We are stuck in our aisle with frozen toes for a good 40 minutes, watching them fight on the field after the game. So that was something else. Before I ask you if you can think of any other ones, there was one event, and it wasn't even a game or like it wasn't even a contest of any kind. I was in college at Ohio State, and I interned at 97.1 The Fan. Actually, I think it was still the AM station, 1460. And every once in a while, the guy that ran the Columbus Clippers would call a press conference. And I'm blanking on his name right now. It will come to me right after we stop recording. But this guy, George Steinbrenner, basically ran the show, right? Ken Schnocky, that was his name. George Steinbrenner ran the show, but Ken liked to act like he thought he was in charge. But anytime George said to do anything, they did it. And what they would do is they would call a press conference. And Cooper Stadium was out on the not so great part of town west of downtown. And it was a bit of not a hike, but it was hard to get there, much harder than where Huntington Park is now downtown. But they'd call these press conferences, and they wouldn't tell you what it's for. And a lot of times back then, we're talking about like the year 2000, right? So like back then, it would be like, oh, Jose Canseco is doing a rehab assignment to get ready to go up to the Yankees, or Wade or Darryl Strawberry was coming off his drug suspension, and he could come and things like that. Well, we get called out there and we think, okay, we're going to be covering, maybe we can get to meet Darryl Strawberry. Wouldn't that be something? So they send me, the intern, out to cover this thing. And it's an announcement that they've allowed a film company to come in and film a movie that's going to be the best movie you've ever seen, Ken Schnocky says. And it went direct to VHS or DVD or whatever it was at the time.
Of course it did.
I remember looking for months afterwards. What was that movie called? I looked at my notes and I'm like, is it even out? Is it even available? Nope, it's not available. But they called a press conference to have us come out and meet the director and learn about this movie that's going to be shot at Cooper Stadium. It's like, this is awful. Why did I come here? So Those are a couple ones
It's
I thought of.
terrible.
Did
Yeah,
you have
sporting event wise, I haven't been to too many stinkers. I mean, really, like Bristol was very, very bad.
Yeah.
I think about other places I've been. I've been all over the country. You know, outside of getting in and out and the traffic and the logistics of big events, like those are always not bad, but you kind of can figure out
That's
what to
part of it.
expect
Yeah.
and what to do. But this, like, I've never been to an event where before the thing even started, they were out of food and they were out of merch and they were out of things. Like this maybe have Bristol may be like the all-time greatest blunder in the history of large venue events. I can't think of another time in sports where I've heard of that happening. Logistics are going to be the thing, but just for an organization as big and have as much money as Major League Baseball to be touting the numbers, they were touting the fact that it was going to be the biggest crowd ever at a baseball game, and to be so ill prepared for that, I don't think you can be that bad on purpose. I think they just decided not to care. They made a decision early on not to care. They got their tickets. That's what matters. You're right. It was a made for TV event. They decided not to care. Now, I've been to other things. Like I've been to some concerts that were bad. I've been to those kind of things, but like a sporting event to fall so flat on its face, it almost feels like it was a decision.
Yeah. I'd like to talk. Maybe I need to talk to Bengal Jim or somebody who's gone over to Europe to watch an NFL game and see how the NFL runs those kind of events, because
I'd be interested to hear that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never heard of anything negative being said about it as far as that goes, but that'd be interesting. When you're talking about like running into people in the concourse and things like that, the funny thing is I went in 2023 to New Busch Stadium in St. Louis, and it was a drizzly day, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and the Cardinals were kind of out of it, and the stadium was barely half full, especially before the game. And it's the first time I'd been in that stadium, and I couldn't believe how on top of everybody you are in the concourse. I don't know if you've been to New Busch, but man, I was really amazed at how
it sounds a lot like Paycor though.
It does. But New Busch is newer than Great American, and I would have thought by the time they built it, they would have had the more wide open concourses. But I mean, we were like banging into people, couldn't get across to the bathroom, things like that. There's the other one, and there's going to be a viewer mail later talking about rain delays. That can be kind of tough. I've got two friends that were at Tom Browning's perfect game, but one of them lived in Gallipolis, Ohio, and his dad made him leave after they waited 2 hours. And if you know where Gallipolis is, he was driving in his driveway when Tom Browning threw the last pitch.
Oh, that's terrible.
So, yeah. So that's the kind of negative event you think of. But yeah, no, it's tough, and I know. I hope, like you said, you had some great seats at Great American, and it looked like you did
I
that
did.
right in the two home Braves games. So I'm glad you got to be there for that, and I'm glad the tsunami didn't really impact anything. That was good too.
Yeah, the tsunami that could have been bad, and we got very, very lucky. Some very minor coastal flooding that didn't really damage anything. We've had worse before, and in Hawaii's history, there's been some really bad ones, but this was fine. We were good. I'm
good.
glad. Consider ourselves lucky.
You were in my thoughts for sure as that was happening. I've got there's a woman that I went to high school with that lives on one of the islands, and I was worried about her and you. So, and obviously a lot of people I don't know. But let's talk about that Cubs series a little bit. They came out of the craziness of the Braves series and the Bristol interesting situation they had there. Did you ever hear for sure? I heard a rumor that they flew to. They didn't fly to Chicago Saturday night, did they? And then back down. They had a hotel.
I did not hear that, and I would be hard pressed to believe that. I can't imagine they did that. That's a lot of for a 1 o'clock game. They would have had to be up very, very early to come back. I don't see that.
The story of Lyon Richardson though getting to the game was pretty funny. That Manfred sent a private jet up to CVG, and he was on his way. I don't know did you hear that story? He was on his way. I did not hear that story. He was on his way down to Louisville. They effectively had sent him down on Saturday morning, technically. And he was on his way from Cincinnati to Louisville to rejoin the Bats. And they got approval to get a 27th player. And he turned around, went back to CVG, and Manfred said a private plane, like his own private plane, to get him. So, and Manfred said that's not going to happen hardly ever again. So you better enjoy that flight. So that was kind of funny. But no,
Well,
the
yeah,
Cubs
he had some
series.
Bristol money to burn. He was fine.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. They had plenty. They came out of the gates in Chicago just great, Steven. You know, you get that warm feeling in your heart. We've talked a lot on this show and on Late Night Reds about the roller coaster that this season has been. When you win 2 games the way they won the first 2 in Wrigley, you start to think, "Ooh, this is the second half push that these Reds are going to have." I guess what was your view as you were trying to get back home? I know, but of those 2 games and getting those couple wins.
Well, this team continues to just do everything in the most frustrating way possible. They should have taken it to the Braves, and the mess that was Bristol notwithstanding, they should have won that series. They didn't. So of course they're going to turn around and beat the Cubs. And even in beating the Cubs, they come out and just pretty much dominate them for 18 innings of baseball.
Exactly.
And then go out on not Sunday. I can't keep doing that. On Wednesday and just kind of look like they're just happy to be there or not happy to be there, whatever the case may be. Sweeps are hard in baseball. I say this a lot on my show, Seth, and I never really get mad at a team for not getting a sweep, win series. And they went out and they did exactly what Jeff and I said they needed to do, which is take 2 or 3 from the Cubs. And even with today's result, as we record, a real stinker in Pittsburgh, still they need to win 3 of 4. And if they're going to have a terrible game, I'm glad it was the day that Paul Skeens was pitching.
Exactly.
And then now go out and win the next 3 and win the series. Reds country likes to tell you about their 2-game losing streak right now. And you have to look broader than that. You have to look bigger than that. You have to look at, they just took a series from the Cubs, who are very good and high atop this division. They're not leading it, but they're high atop. You've got a Pittsburgh Pirates team that was starting one of the best pitchers in baseball today. And, I kind of counted that as a loss already because Skeens was going and he's been so good. So, what they do next matters. And, I said they needed to go 5-2 on this road trip. Well, if they win on this stretch of division games, 5-2. So if they win the next 3 and win this series, they've done exactly what I've asked of them. They have frustrated me a lot along the way, but at the end of it, I got to be like, well, this is what I said I needed them to do, and they did it. So let's go.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, certainly the Bristol Malays could have caught up to them on Wednesday. You play that day game after the night game when you're in Chicago. You go up against a pitcher that's getting a lot of calls and just seemingly baffling them. But then again, you're right. It's hard to sweep a team, including the Cubs, and that's just going to happen sometime. And you're also right. Like when you face Skeens, like the game tonight, it basically came down to Brady Singer had 2 outs in the first inning and then couldn't get past it. He gives up a home run on a 3-0 count to Reynolds, and then he throws 35, 40 pitches in that first inning, and it was over. It was already over in that first inning. And that's what it comes down to.
It was bad. It was bad Brady Singer. I talked about this on my show yesterday that, you can look at his last 5 starts and there's bad Brady Singer, who is, one of those starts was like 2 1/3 against the Nationals, but lots of hits, lots of runs. And then his last couple starts, a few hits, no more than 1 run. And they needed good Brady Singer, and that guy is either still at Bristol or hanging out. I don't know where he is, but he was not in the ballpark today. So, but again, I mean, if he was gonna, if one of the starters was gonna go out there and just be blah, this is the game that I wanted it in. So, all of those stars aligned. So hopefully the Reds have that out of their system now. Brady Singer has been. Go ahead.
No, he's been good. I mean, the last 2 starts were great. And to be fair, tonight he could have gone 6 innings, give up 2 or 3 runs, and still lost. So it is what it is there. I mean, you're right. And so that's what it comes down to. Yeah, Skeens just is Skeens. And, the Reds haven't figured him out, nor has anybody else, really. So that's where it's going to be. But you're right. The next 3 games, as we look at Friday, Saturday, Sunday, against the woeful Pirates overall, are going to be what matters. Well, hey, we're recording this very late here on East Coast time, and I know you've got a lot of things to worry about work-wise. Let's go ahead and turn to viewer mail. I put out the bat signal. I let them know you would be here. So we're just going to hit it. Joey Kaditsa. So like,
good.
You're in Hawaii. Joey Gaditz is up in Canada, right? As Chad used to
Right.
say, Canada. And Joey says, "Cheers, Steve." Did they say cheers a lot in Hawaii? You
I
don't get
don't
that
hear a
much.
lot of cheers.
Not
No,
much cheers.
that's a Canadian. That's a Canuckism, is what that
Yeah,
is.
there you go. Cheers, Seth and Steve. Just want to say thanks for all the Reds coverage y'all provide. See, a y'all coming from Canada too. That's amazing. I sat through a 3-hour rain delay with lightning at a CFL game one time. Beer vendors quit selling the goods, and needless to say, that didn't go over well. Ha ha. The game eventually resumed that night, but wrapped up early in the morning, but the joint stayed packed. I remember I went to Wrigley one time, Steve, and I saw it was 2015, and they just put the video boards up. That was the first year, and actually, I was there on Friday night, and the bleachers were still closed. Remember when they redid those? And
Mhm.
then Sunday night, I was at Sunday night baseball, so we went. No, it was maybe even Saturday night and Sunday night. And Saturday night, the bleachers were still closed. Sunday night, we were in the bleachers for the first game that they opened.
Oh, that's cool.
But on the game the night before, there was a long rain delay, and the Blackhawks were in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and they put them up on the video board. And we basically watched them win the game. The Blackhawks win the game, and then the Reds and the Cubs play right after that. And I'm
Oh, that's
shaking my
excellent.
camera. But yeah, it was a pretty cool thing. And then actually, when they opened up it had been damp all weekend. When they opened up the bleachers, the paint was still wet on the wall.
Of
Like
course it
so
was.
the brick comes up and then there's concrete, and
Right.
I had these white shorts with kind of gray plaid, and then I had shoes with white on the front and back. I got green paint all over me.
Now, did
And
you save those shorts as a souvenir of Wrigley
I still
Field?
have them. Yeah, I
There
got
you
rid of the
go.
shoes. But the funny thing is, somebody said, "Well, you ought to." There was a guy out there because listen, like they still hadn't opened restrooms. You had to go. You know where the scoreboard is in center field at Wrigley. You had to go all
Mhm.
the way down to the base of that scoreboard to go to the restroom because they still weren't done yet with everything. And so I remember coming back through, and the guy saw me. I was like, "Man, this paint down here is still wet. I didn't. You guys didn't realize that?" And he's like, "Oh no, we thought it was dry. I was sorry. I'm gonna send somebody over to you." And I'm like, "Yeah, whatever. That's fine." Well, this guy comes and he says, "Hey, would you want to come down on the field after the game? We're really sorry you got paint all over you." I'm like, "Sure.
Ah,
I'll go
cool.
on the Wrigley Field.
Yeah.
Foul
Hang
territory
out
there."
on the field.
Yeah, we stood there in the batters, the on deck circle. So that was pretty cool. We got
Well,
pictures.
that's cool.
Yeah.
For Joey Gaditza's story there, I can tell you this: that will never happen in a Major League Baseball game. They will not. If there is beer to be sold, they will keep
They wouldn't
people
stop.
in that ballpark and sell it, because that's just how they roll.
Yeah, I know. It was it Sean Casey told the story about Veterans Stadium, and their bus was already leaving because they knew it had been canceled.
Mhm.
And there were still people when the bus came out. They could see people giving their tickets and still
Mhm.
going in because they
Get
hadn't
those beer
announced.
sales, baby.
That's right. That's right. Tim Daniel chimes in, and Tim certainly is friend to both of us, having worked with each of us. But he said, "I had the same experience as Steve," so I guess he doesn't want to tell the story because he was there with you. Um, but he says, "Ask him about trying sheets for the first time."
Oh my God! So by the time I never got a morsel of food, the entire 9 hours we were at the
I
Bristol
was going
Motor
to ask how
Speedway.
many hours? 9 hours.
Like 9 hours we were in there, something like that, 10 hours. Did not eat. Tim stood in some ridiculous line long enough to get the world's worst pizza I've ever seen. Like the cheese wasn't melted, and I don't even know if the bread was cooked all the way through. It looked terrible. And I simply refused. I was not going to do it. The only money I actually managed to spend in the Bristol Motor Speedway was I happened upon a guy that had just resupplied his beer bucket. So he had a couple beers for sale, and I grabbed them real quick and didn't have to wait in a line. That's the extent of what I was able to purchase in Bristol. So when we got out, the game finally gets called around, I don't know, 10:30. It took the next 3 hours to get the 20 minutes from the Bristol Motor Speedway to our Airbnb. So we finally get there, and I've never eaten food from this Sheets place, but I am starving. And so Tim's like, "Oh, you drove and you paid for the gas. Here, I'm buying dinner." Like, just get whatever you want. I am on the couch, like a stoned college kid, dude. I am just every button that comes up on this Sheets thing, I am buying it, like clicking it. Like I'm surprised the Uber driver that did, or the Uber Eats person or whoever they were, didn't have to like bring help to carry the bags. They come rolling in with all of this food. It was ridiculous, and I crushed every single piece of it, man. I was starving to death, but it was good. Would go again. I mean, you know, at that point, it could have been like crusty dry bread, and I would have thought it was amazing. I was so hungry, but it was good.
I'll tell you, their milkshakes are worth.
Yeah, Tim got one. I missed the milkshake tab as I was flying through ordering all the other stuff, but Tim got one, and
those milkshakes are legit. What did you have?
Oh man, I had tacos, and I had pot stickers, and I had a cheeseburger, and we had loaded tater tots, and I think there was a chicken sandwich involved, and I don't know, there was lots of stuff.
Yeah, so we've got several sheets.
And I added bacon to everything. If you could click add bacon, I added bacon.
Well, Tim was paying. Yeah, we've got some sheets here, and I've never like. It certainly isn't like Buc-ee's where you got to stop, and get the brisket or something. But I just think, well, I've got plenty of fried food options on every block here. So, but let me try that milkshake, and I've gone out of my way to get the milkshake more than once. So.
Okay, I'll have to hit that next time.
I will
stop at Buc-ee's on the way home too, by the way.
I will vouch for that. You did go to Buc-ee's?
Oh yeah.
And you've been there before though, so.
Oh yeah. Little taste right there.
I asked this guy to please tell me how to pronounce his last name, and I never got an answer. So I'm going to go with Brian Bout or Boute, Baute.
Okay.
Baute. Brian says, I don't know your exact age, but this one hit me pretty good because this game was the one I celebrated a lot. All right. He says, I was at the Bengals 61-7 shellacking of the Houston Oilers in December 1989. That game was the one thing to hang our hat on because the Bengals went to the Super Bowl in 88. And where I grew up, there was a lot of Browns fans. And in 89, the Browns went back to the playoffs and the Bengals didn't. And I could at least say that the Bengals had beaten a team 61-7. It was because of the feud that Sam Weish had with Jerry Glanville, if you remember.
That's right. And I think that was Max Montoya's final game as a Bengal in Riverfront Stadium.
Yeah. So he says he went to the game. He says, my feet were numb before kickoff. And I remember the guy sitting in front of us having beer sickles hanging from his mustache. My dad was a UPS delivery driver and had season tickets with 3 of his coworkers. And after being out in the cold all week, none of them wanted to be out in it again on Sunday. So they gave their tickets to my brother and me. Skyline after the game never tasted so good. Now, I'm sorry, Brian. I hear that you were cold. I get that stands out. But you were at the 61-7 win, man. Like, I don't know how old you were at that age. I would have been like 10, and I would have been like just really excited. That game, I lived on that game for the next year.
Well, that was a good one. And I remember that Max Montoya was retiring. That's how that game makes a lasting impression. The cold games at Riverfront, they'll get you. I was at the Vikings Bengals game, which was previously the biggest comeback in Bengals history. They were down 21-0 at halftime, and they won on a field goal as time expired 24-21 in that game, with it snowing in December at Riverfront Stadium. There's nothing like it. Always a good time.
So listen, I grew up 3-hour drive to Cincinnati, and I didn't go to my first Reds game until 88. I saw it was my grandmother's birthday, June 18th, and we saw Chris Sabo hit a home run, hit a triple, and he slid so hard into Kevin Mitchell, who was playing third base for the Giants, that Mitchell couldn't handle the ball. So Sabo scored, and I thought, well, he had 2 home runs because that's how that works in Little League. So it's a home run. So I saw that game, and then I went the next year, and that's when I had a long rain delay. So we drove 3 hours to get there. We were there because the rain delay plus the game was 6 hours, and then we drove 3 hours home. So I remember that being a big deal. Now, football, I only went to one Bengals game in Riverfront ever. It was the Corey Dillon 246 yards on Thursday Night Football.
No way.
I was at Ohio State. I was a freshman. My college roommate, well, he would be my roommate the next 3 years. He was 2 doors down in the dorm. And I walked up to him Thursday morning. I said, hey, You want to go to the Bengals game tonight? And he said, okay. I walked over to the Newport Music Hall here in Columbus, and they had a Ticketmaster outlet. I bought 2 tickets. We got in the car and we went. We met the Bengals and we went and watched the game. And I saw Eddie George, a favorite from Ohio State, playing for the then Tennessee Oilers. And then I saw Corey Dillon break the rookie rushing record.
Well, that's like a pinnacle Bengals, at least for that time period too. You couldn't top that. No need to go back.
We get back to the dorm, and the next door guy was a Cleveland Browns guy, and that was the stretch where the Bengals would start like 1-7, and then they would go like 6-2 or 7-1 to finish the season. And we get
talking about last season, last couple of years.
You're right, but that happened.
Talking about the Zach Taylor era.
That happened yearly around the 2-14 years and things like that back in the day. And he just said, "Yep, you'll be bad again next year." I'm like, well, at least we have a team, because they didn't. Cleveland didn't have a team at that point. All right, I'm going to let you out of here on this one. And this one's going to be interesting because there's actually a GIF involved, and we're a video product, but I don't really have it available to show it. So you'll have to go search for it out there, folks listening and watching on YouTube. Brandon Kamick says, my wife is a Western Kentucky alum. Go Hilltoppers, right? And she's an absolutely diehard Hilltopper. When we were first dating, I took her to a Kentucky against Western Kentucky neutral site football game. Wow, I wonder where that was. Where do you think you play a neutral site game between Kentucky and Western Kentucky?
Harlan County.
I'll have to do some research. Yeah. Was Raylan Givens on detail there? He says, I talked trash for weeks. UK is a very mediocre football program, but Western is a borderline Division II school. So no problems, right? We can see where this is going. Wrong. Not only did UK lose, but our starting quarterback cemented himself in GIF history with this beauty. I present to you the self-sack. And you're not going to be able to see it on here. It's going to be glared, but there.
That's he just falls down.
That's as bad as the butt fumble.
That's pretty close.
Yeah, that's not good. Not good at all to lose to an
especially if you've been talking smack for 2 weeks. I feel like that's a problem.
And not the stereotype, but a lot of times the guy thinks he knows more than the girl, and as far as sports goes, and so he's telling his girlfriend how it's going to be a cakewalk and things like that. And I got tickets for a friend of mine I grew up with, Greg Gifford. He's now the superintendent of my school district back home, but he was either just married or still dating his now wife, and he wanted to take her to the Ohio State Marshall game in 2004 because she grew up in Huntington, West Virginia, and she was a big Marshall fan.
Okay.
So I arranged to get him
I
arranged to get him tickets. I am going to the game as well. We meet outside the stadium. I hadn't seen him much since high school. Give him the tickets, meet the girl, said hi, everything. Oh, you're from Marshall. That's cute. Good. You got your paycheck today. That's the game that Mike Nugent had to hit the 55-yarder to win the game.
It was a close one.
Right. So it almost went the wrong way. Speaking of freezing cold Bengals game, Mike Nugent supposedly was in the womb or just out of the womb at the Freezer Bowl. I don't know if you ever heard that story.
I have not, but the Freezer Bowl, I don't know that I could have made it to that. I think I would watch that from home. I'm a diehard, but I don't know if I'm that diehard. You know what I'm saying?
I think a lot of the Chargers players kind of felt the same way.
Right?
Yeah. So, yeah, cold is not fun. It's just not. And you're right. There was something about Riverfront with the concrete, all that.
It's just cold. Yeah.
There were some opening days that were really cold.
The first one, it snowed. I was at the very first opening day at Great American Ballpark, and it snowed.
It did. It certainly did. We were out in right field in the sun deck. Well, it wasn't really a sun deck that day, but I got sucked into how am I going to get opening day tickets? I've got the streak we've talked about before, basically because the umpire John McSherry died in 96. That's the only one I've missed except for COVID since 1995. I went to my first in 95. But it got harder and harder to get tickets, especially they went from a 55,000 seat stadium to a 43,000 seat stadium. So that made it harder. And then the cost and things like that associated sometimes made it harder. So at one point when the Reds would do those Baker's dozen type deals where you bought 13 games and they threw in opening day as the 13th game, basically, I got that, and I lived in Columbus, and I was like, what if I can't get to all the games? How am I going to make this work? Well, I figured if I bought bleacher seats, that those were cheap enough that even if I couldn't make a game, it wouldn't kill me, and I'd get
Mhm.
who cares where you sit on opening day? You're there, right?
Right.
So I was at all those opening days, but I was in left field at the opening day when Adam Dunn misplayed like 4 fly balls because of how windy it was, and
Not a defensive juggernaut,
it
that
was about
Adam Dunn.
38 degrees, and I figured out pretty quickly that wind comes either over top of the GABP or where they have the openings and things like that. It comes straight out to left field early in the
Mhm.
spring like that. And so now my move is to sit behind home plate in either the 400, like 423 or 523,
Mhm.
like right there.
Yep.
If I can't get a better seat, but if you sit there, at least the wind is being blocked by the concrete of the stadium and things like that.
Right.
But
For sure.
that seat out there that day out in left field and in a metal bleacher, yeah,
Oh.
that was bitter. That was bitter. That wasn't good. Yep. I think so. The coldest I've ever been at a sporting event was actually my son's soccer game in Middletown, Ohio. It was March. It was like March 11th, so it shouldn't be that cold, but feels like 11. And these kids are playing soccer, and like little snow pellet type things were flying,
Mhm.
and they're coming in sideways, and like the ground was so hard they were bouncing. Like it wasn't. It looked like snowflakes, but then they would bounce. It's like,
Right.
what is this? And I remember one dad had like 6 blankets just wrapped around him. He was about this wide. He was refrigerator Perry wide. Yeah, so that was really cold. And I always joke with referees because it's like, if it's too hot or too cold at some of these soccer tournaments, I can look at them and I can say, well, at least you're getting paid to be here. We paid thousands of dollars for the privilege to be out here in this. So, yeah, that's where that is with weather. But because that's when it's your kid, you have to be there.
For sure. You can't skip it.
Yeah. All right, Steven, I've kept you long enough, and I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing a little bit of your Bristol experience. Um, I was thanking my lucky stars that I didn't make the move because I know there was a time when this was announced, being that Chad and Nate are from that neck of the woods, as they would literally say there, that we were talking about a riverfront like meetup when we were all still kind of together doing the thing about a year ago. And I was pretty happy with myself that I was in my 3 seasons room, nice little breeze coming through.
Well, it's good you didn't plan that, because you would have had to meet in downtown Bristol, because it would not have happened at the Bristol Motor Speedway. You might have been able to wave at each other from across a concourse. It wouldn't meetup was not going to happen. I'm bummed too, because I wanted to spend some time talking to Chad and making fun of his ridiculous accent, and I didn't get to. But next time.
Well, you might have had somebody sitting next to you that sounded like Chad. I mean,
I did, in fact.
Yeah.
I did, in fact.
Well, here's the funny thing. Actually, somebody in the Slack said to Chad, or maybe it was a tweet, said, "Hey, why don't you share your Bristol experience on the next Riverfront Reds show?" And I texted with Chad, and he says, "It's my wedding anniversary. If I come on your show on my wedding anniversary, that wouldn't be good." I said, "The number of times you've been asked, not just by me, to come on this show again since you left the show, for you to say no every time because you're busy or you have work or whatever, if you would have made this the exception and come on your wedding anniversary, that would have been something else."
Yeah, I
So
don't think Mrs. Dotson would have been very thrilled with that.
happy anniversary, Mrs. Dotson. And here's
Yes.
the other thing as we sign off here in a moment. Virginia will play Ohio State in men's basketball on
Ooh.
Valentine's Day in Nashville. And he and I have teased back and forth that maybe we could meet up and go see our favorite teams, our alma maters, play each other. And I put out today on Twitter, I said, if Chad won't join me on his wedding anniversary on the riverfront, maybe he will meet me on Valentine's Day. And he sent back a meme of Top Gun and Let's Go or whatever it says. And I got to looking at it and I'm like, uh-oh. My wife and I just booked a trip for our family to go to Universal
Oh,
February
see.
12th through the 16th.
Oh,
So
you're in trouble now.
I'm not going to be in Nashville. So sorry, Chad. I hope this isn't how you find out. But Steven, tell the folks out there where they can find you as if they haven't already found you.
Oh my goodness, my man. I am all over the socials. You can follow me at S Offenbaker. I am on the Locked On Reds podcast Monday through Friday. You can find us at Locked On Reds. We've got all kinds of Reds content. And Tim Daniel, you all are familiar with him. He's doing Reds postcast live after each and every Reds game. Same at Locked On Reds feed on YouTube, everywhere you get your podcasts. Check us out. Click subscribe. We love talking baseball with you.
No doubt about it. And you've gotten me through some mowing sessions and some other things as I try to dive into more Reds content. So thank you so much for joining me here, but all the work you do to talk about our Cincinnati Reds. There are Reds again. I keep saying there's somebody else's Reds, but there are Reds through the rest of the year, right. Don't you think?
That's
all right. Hey, if there's another Rose Bowl appearance, let's maybe meet up there.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. For Stephen Offenbaker, I am Seth Shaner. Go ahead and click the like and subscribe buttons wherever you find them, and check out the Riverfront on social media. So long, everybody.